lost everything I ever cared about. Everything.
Almost like every day is your last.
I want to stay alive for me. Because if I'm going to die in here, I'm going to die for my truth.
When you see the crime scene pictures, it's very disconcerting because there are cute little Christmas tree and blood.
It's so ugly, it's even hard just to describe.
It must have been absolutely, you know, like something out of the worst, most violent Quentin Tarantino movie.
Two weeks before Christmas in 2003, the perfectly manicured community of Mansfield, Texas, was rocked by a grotesque double homicide. The victims, Rick and Susanna Walmsley.
The mother was shot while lying on a couch. The father's body was found not too far away, sort of near the foyer. He was shot and stabbed, and so was the mother. She was shot and stabbed somewhere between 18 and 21 times.
At first, the Mansfield police had no leads on who could have killed the couple inside their suburban Fort Worth home. Rick Walmsley, a successful CPA, and his wife Susanna led the seemingly perfect life.
Susanna was one of these women who's still beautiful, you know, into middle age. Just this naturally beautiful redhead. She was a homemaker who always knew exactly the right thing to do. People envied them in a lot of ways, but they had troubled relationships with their children.
Before long, detectives zeroed in on Rick and Susanna's son, 19-year-old Andrew. His girlfriend, Chelsea Richardson, and her best friend, Susana Toledano, also became suspects.
I can't speak on anybody else, but I know I'm innocent. I'm convicted of something I didn't do.
Despite her claim of innocence, prosecutors say young Chelsea was the driving force behind a cold-blooded scheme to wipe out Andrew's parents.
As a matter of fact, prosecutors really painted Chelsea Richardson as the mastermind of this whole crime, and that she had influenced Andrew Walmsley and her other friends to piece together this plot that they would enter into the house and kill the parents in hopes that Andrew could inherit his family's estate, and that they would all be set up for life. They would buy a house and live together and have all this money.
Growing up, money was tight for Chelsea, who lived with her family on the rural fringe of Fort Worth. The Richardsons didn't have much, but they had each other.
We had a close family. If one parent wasn't there, the other one was there, and at night they were usually both there, unless my dad had to travel for work.
But when Chelsea was 15, the father she adored suffered from a sudden heart attack.
And we called 911, and they didn't answer for 10 minutes. And my mom had me help do CPR on my dad. God, give my dad back. Take me, don't take my dad, you know? But he didn't come back.
When he passed away, it hit all of us really hard.
Chelsea took it the hardest.
Especially with her still in high school, it was really difficult for her. It's like she tried to go ahead and focus more on her friends and her school.
Susana Toledano became Chelsea's closest friend.
She and Susanna had gotten close at school and were best buddies, best friends forever, that kind of thing.
Prosecutors say Chelsea was the dominant one in the relationship.
Prosecutors painted Susanna Toledano as a shy and awkward girl who really had difficulty entering into many social circles. And Chelsea Richardson as very gregarious, had a bubbly personality, and who was someone who could really carry Susanna Toledano into some of those social circles.
When she was 18, Susanna, who was having problems at home, moved in with the Richardsons.
It was a little weird having somebody live in the house that wasn't family. It's not necessarily bad, it's just, I guess, strange.
It was Chelsea's older brother, James, who would eventually introduce the girls to 19-year-old Andrew Walmsley. Andrew had recently graduated from high school, but was still living at home.
Andrew was one of these kids who wanted to work with his hands. He didn't want to go sit in school and study to be a CPA or to be that kind of boxed in. He loved souping up his car. He had a white Mustang. He wanted to be an auto mechanic, and they had higher expectations for him.
Andrew worked at a miniature golf course and, at his parents' urging, took classes at the local junior college. But he would often spend late nights at the IHOP in nearby Arlington playing rounds of Yu-Gi-Oh! With Chelsea's brother.
It's kind of a game, a lot more involved than chess.
They spent all this time at the IHOP playing Yu-Gi-Oh! This card game, this fantasy card game that you think of little children playing.
One night, Chelsea tagged along.
She'd go over there, she'd play games, hang out with us. They eventually met, and I don't know, after a time, they just kind of started talking.
You know, I'm sure as soon as she saw him, she just was like, bam, you know, that was it. Like, here's this, you know, kind of cute kid who's got some money and he's hanging out with us, you know?
Andrew had a reputation for being arrogant and brash and just like better than everybody else.
Andrew had an explosive temper.
People didn't like to work for him at the putt-putt golf place where he worked because he was just obnoxious. But with Chelsea and her friends, he really found sort of a niche.
Andrew was attracted to things that weren't where he was from. He liked the working class. He liked the kind of a bit more laid-back atmosphere, and, you know, Chelsea really embodied all of that.
Chelsea and Andrew began dating. When it came time to meet the parents, Rick and Susanna Walmsley did not approve.
She did not feel welcome there. You know, Chelsea was overweight. She did not present herself necessarily like the cheerleaders and the smart girls at the school where Andrew went. She was not the person they would have chosen for their son to have a serious relationship with.
The two had even talked about getting married.
This is his first serious relationship, and he's got to make a choice. Is he going to be the big dog in her world or the little whipped pup in his parents' world?
In the fall of 2003, Andrew dropped out of junior college. The Walmsleys threatened to cut their son off financially.
Instead of actually saying, well, okay, I need to do this, 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 and this to get the kind of job that I can support myself with the way I want to, they started just toying with the idea to shoot at the Walmsley's car.
A cruel and deadly idea that prosecutors say grew out of Andrew and Chelsea's mounting resentment.
They had met several times at a local IHOP and talked about ways that they could kill Andrew Walmsley's parents so that he could inherit his family's estate, which, according to court records, showed it was valued at somewhere about $1.65 million. And that included their house, which is a very nice house, and also a $1 million life insurance policy.
According to testimony, Susana Toledano's loyalty kept her from backing out.
It's difficult for anybody to speculate about how an idea like that gets formulated, but, you know, it was this perfect storm of Chelsea wants money, she wants a big life. You know, Andrew hates his parents, and they've got Susana Toledano who will do whatever they tell her to do.
Susana didn't have a choice. She didn't have a choice, you know. She had to do what Chelsea said.
She could get not only the son and the money, and she could get revenge too. There's this sense that I got from talking to people that Chelsea all along was this little voice, insistent voice in Andrew Walmsley's ear.
Chelsea Richardson alludes to a different scenario.
I wouldn't necessarily say my life took a wrong direction or I hooked up with the wrong crowd, because people can lie to you. You can be the best friend of somebody and they had this whole double life. That's happened to me.
In 2003, prosecutors say Chelsea Richardson, her boyfriend Andrew Walmsley, and her best friend Susana Toledano cooked up a cold-blooded plot to kill Andrew's parents. They hoped to cash in on a life insurance policy and an estate worth $1.6 million. That fall, the three put the plan into action.
So they asked Hilario Cardenas, who was a manager at the IHOP, if he could get them a gun, and he got him a gun. And they, had some rounds of shooting practice. The first plan to kill the Walmsleys, they were going to shoot at the gas tank of the Walmsleys' car because they had seen that in a movie.
It's going to blow up in a big fireball, and it will consume all 3 of the other Walmsleys, and then they get a check in the mail,
The first attempt took place on the afternoon of November 9th, 2003, as Rick and Susanna Walmsley and Andrew's sister Sarah visited a horse farm.
So Andrew and Susanna load up in the car in Andrew's incredibly noticeable white Mustang that his parents bought for him.
Susie Toledano takes a shot at the Walmsley, the parents,
thinking that this was going to make the car blow up, which of course it did not. But they did hit the car. Andrew's mother calls Andrew as soon as the bullets hit the car, within seconds, and says, "Where the f*** are you?" Because she knew something was going on, and they had probably seen that white Mustang.
They had filed a report about somebody shooting at the car and seeing the white Mustang that looked suspiciously like their son's.
My money, what right do you have to?
After the attempt at shooting the gas tank on the car didn't work, they determined that they were actually going to have to go into the Walmsley's home, and they were going to make it look like a burglary, and they were going to shoot the Walmsleys with this gun that they still had.
The 3 would spend hours sharpening their skills at a friend's ranch.
They all went out in the country practicing shooting to see who was the best shot.
Not long after that, they made the attempt that actually ended up working.
On the night of December 11th, 2003, Susanna had already done all of her Christmas decorations perfectly.
Andrew had a key to his parents' house, and so they go in through the garage.
His mother was asleep on the couch.
And when they get to the dining room, Susanna's got the gun.
And Toledano says, "Chelsea gave me a little push," and she shoots Miss Walmsley in the head. Then proceeds on to the bedroom and shoots the father, who, though, puts up a terrific struggle.
According to Susanna Toledano, after she shot him, that he was basically down on his knees. And Andrew Walmsley and Chelsea Richardson walked toward Rick Walmsley as he begged for his life and asked them why they were doing this.
At some point, he had to have realized that his own son was killing him. I think for any parent, that's the ultimate nightmare. There's somebody that has a knife, and they start stabbing him, but he still keeps coming. And then he grabs Susanna, grabs her hair, and pulls her hair.
Andrew ends up shooting him in the foyer of his own home.
And at this point, Toledano says that Chelsea Richardson told her to go back and finish off Miss Walmsley.
Go out the back door, get in the car, put their clothes in a trash bag.
And then nothing happens. They don't get a call from the police. Nobody discovers them. So Andrew takes it upon himself. They go back in the house and they dial 911. Nobody says anything, they just hang up, but the police show up. And at some point, Andrew and Chelsea drive up. Like, "Oh, I heard about this on the news." They act the surprised relatives of the crime victims. And for a while, that's all they're considered.
The plan was to shut up and wait for the money. That's what Chelsea told Susanna. Act like nothing happened. Act totally normal.
Mansfield detectives soon learned of Andrew's difficult relationship with his parents. The cops obtained a warrant to search his Mustang.
The police were not able to find any specific, DNA evidence or anything in the car. They'd really done a pretty good job of cleaning it out.
3.5 months later, the detectives finally made a break in the case.
One of the few pieces of physical evidence they had was a clump of hair that Rick, in his fight to stay alive, had grabbed at Susanna and pulled from her hair. And as the police officers who were investigating the case zeroed in, they asked family members for samples of DNA.
Susana Toledano was arrested on April 5, 2003, and charged with murder. Hoping to avoid the death penalty, she decided to tell the police everything.
So she plea bargains out, says, yeah, I'm guilty, and starts spilling this story of these lost, angry kids who convinced her to help them kill the Walmsleys, who told her that they would give her a lot of money.
2 days later, Andrew Walmsley and his girlfriend Chelsea Richardson were arrested and indicted for capital murder.
I was at a local restaurant, and next thing I know, there's all these people, and I'm under arrest, and I can't figure out why. It was heartbreaking to be taken to the police station, to be interrogated, and you're like, why am I here? You know, you don't understand. What in the world happened here, you know?
The revelation that Andrew and his girlfriend and her best friend were involved in this murder just sent this town into shock.
During Chelsea's trial, prosecutors relied on Susana to relive the horror of what happened that night.
When you have a young woman on a witness stand admitting her role in killing 2 people, her testimony became very powerful and very strong for the prosecution, even though the prosecutor's case did not have any physical evidence that linked Chelsea Richardson to the crime.
The prosecution painted this scene of Chelsea coaching Susana in the dining room. You can do it. When they get to the dining room, Susana's got the gun, and Chelsea, according to her testimony, urged her to go in there and shoot Mrs. Walmsley in the head.
Under Texas law, you don't have to necessarily be the trigger man in a crime, but if you go along with other defendants who are involved in the crime, you're equally as culpable and can be prosecuted the same way as the trigger man.
If you don't have Toledano's testimony, you don't have a case. There would be no conviction, I'm telling you right now. Zero, zippo.
But the Mansfield police were also able to prove that the gun used to kill the Walmsleys was also the weapon used for target practice at the ranch. In May 2005, 21-year-old Chelsea Richardson was sentenced to death. In exchange for her testimony, Susana Toledano received life in prison.
I think prosecutors were willing to seek the death penalty against Chelsea Richardson because prosecutors felt that she had even talked Andrew Walmsley into killing his parents.
In March 2006, Andrew Walmsley received life in prison. His attorneys said he suffered from mental illness and as a result could be easily manipulated.
In Chelsea's case, they were able to show that Chelsea had more of an active role, more of a planning role. She was more persistent than Andrew.
I mean, a lot of things were said that weren't true at my trial, that people lied a lot. It's hell on earth. They're like the cell doors you see on movies, just the bars, but they're painted black and it says death row. We're behind a locked gate where we can't go nowhere. You can't come out your cell unless you're stripped.
Chelsea consoles herself by writing poetry, drawing, and immersing herself in the Bible.
Chelsea believes God's going to bring her through this.
You don't know what tomorrow holds. That just hits you even harder, you know? You think, oh my God, they're executing people and these people ain't even had a chance or nothing. So yeah, I'm afraid to die. I'm not afraid of where I go. I know I'll go with God. He knows. I know.
I honestly feel Chelsea is innocent. I do. There is no evidence. And I think there was, I believe with her lawyer, there was a lot of wrong done in her trial.
James Richardson also stands by his sister Chelsea, even though the two have never spoken about what happened that night.
I know she didn't have nothing to do with this, so I would need to ask her where she was. By asking that, it'd just be just as good as me saying I don't believe you.
It shatters your world. It shatters your family. You're hurting. Your family's hurting. I can't even touch my family, you know? It's horrible. It's absolutely horrible.
Looking over at her every time we go and visit her, and knowing that there's still a chance that she could die. To sit there and see her on the other side of the glass never really be able to give her a hug again.
I think a lot of times reporters, we think that if we can go back into someone's past and we can put together all the pieces and talk to all the people, that somehow it's going to make sense at the end. I didn't think there was any logic to this. There were so many reasons not to commit this crime. When you try to make sense of the terrible things people do, maybe there isn't any sense to be made from it.